trade situation continues to be a problem. I think that China, as you know, we saw China yesterday, the day before. President Xi, I think, is going to be a tremendous help. I hope Russia, likewise, will be a tremendous help. I think they can make a big difference. I know that South Korea and Japan are very much unified in the sense that they want to be able to take care of a problem that's right next to them, really their neighbors. And I appreciate all of the good work you're doing with regard to the North Korea problem. South China Sea, as you know, we're looking at together. If I can help mediate or arbitrate, please let me know. We've had a dispute for quite a while with China. If I can help in any way, I'm a very good mediator and a very good arbitrator. I have done plenty of it from both sides, so if I can help you, let me know. Our defense ties are terrific. We're doing a lot of business with you in terms of your purchasing of materials and also purchasing very substantial military equipment and equipment. And we appreciate that. It's jobs for America, and we get the best equipment in the world. Nobody makes it like we make it. And I think that more than anything else, this will be a meeting of trade. We will be a great trade partner. I know that we'll be treated fairly. Past administrations didn't understand trade, and they didn't know too much about what was going on with trade. But we do, but we also know how to do a lot of trade. So I think it's going to be very, very good for Vietnam.
Insult me old when I would never call him short and fat. Oh well, I try so hard to be his friend and maybe someday that will happen. He then confirmed that a friendship between the two of them was in fact possible. I want to bring back today's panel, Elise Hu, Ian Bremer, and Richard Haas. Richard, the reference was, of course, to the fact that I think it was 2 weeks ago, the North Koreans called Trump a dotard. Did you know what the word dotard meant?
The honest answer is no. I'd never heard of it. We looked it up in the dictionary, found some Shakespearean references to it, and clearly the rather thin-skinned occupant of the Oval Office had been nursing a grudge for several weeks now. And this is not classic diplomacy. Let me just say, you asked the question, which I assume was rhetorical, Fareed, about whether this will help us solve the North Korean problem. It's not immediately apparent that it will.
But Elise, it's fair to say, though, the big news policy-wise out of this trip that Trump has taken is that he has actually softened his position on Asia, which I must confess I had always predicted he would, by which I mean threats, the fire and fury, there was no military option. It was pretty clear, and he seemed to have dialed it back in various ways.
He certainly dialed it back rhetorically when he was in Japan and in Seoul. And now there's more and more talk of a possible other way to get to the negotiating table, possibly by ways of a 60-day freeze on any provocations. I don't know when that clock would actually start, and I assume that clock hasn't started yet, but there hasn't been any sort of provocation from North Korea now since September 15th. And it sounds like Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and his top North Korea official, Joseph Yoon, are talking about or floating this notion of a freeze.
Ian, what do you think?
Well, two quick things. One is I'm glad he decided to wait on his tweet until after he had left Japan and South Korea so that Kim Jong-un might not be tempted to kind of, do a test there in the region. I think Trump did probably think about that. But beyond that, there's another big thing that changed here, which is that he said that the Russians could really be helpful. The Chinese have been helpful. The Russians could be helpful, but haven't been. You know why? Because fake news and the Democrats and Mueller are working so hard to stop Trump from being able to work with Putin. This is a, sort of behind a backhand way of Trump quieting down the North Korea issue by blaming other people, and I think that's an easy way for him to stop talking about fire and fury. He's going to blame the domestics, and that works for him, frankly.
Richard, do you think that there's a solution here in some version of what Elise was talking about, a kind of freeze for freeze? And does it have to be, Joshua Ramo at Kissinger has been kind of proposing this idea of broadening the is there something there, or what is the way to make everybody be willing to kind of stand down from, everyone is in a box now. How do you get out of that box and start talking?
Well, I think denuclearization remains a long-term goal, just not the immediate goal. There a freeze on testing, maybe later a freeze on production of nuclear warheads and missiles. And what the United States has to decide is what we would be prepared to offer in exchange, say, as a first step, for a freeze on testing. If we're not going to cancel, and we shouldn't, our military exercises, do we have a formal end to the Korean War, which has never had just that? Are we prepared to change what we do in the way of sanctions? Maybe even articulate certain incentives for North Korea if we were to do certain things. So the United States has to flesh out essentially a diplomatic position and be willing to take as a first step something less than the solution of the problem.
Elise, it's worth pointing out, isn't it, that in South Korea, the funny thing is, even Trump's provocations, Kim Jong-un's provocations, the stock market would keep going up. There is a tendency to believe that there isn't going to be a war, and they very much do not want American military action. Right.
Absolutely. I get the question a lot, what's it like in Seoul? Because especially when the rhetoric ramps up, people get nervous here in the United States and in other parts of the world. But really in Seoul, life goes on as normal. And I'm always saying, everything's fine. This is the big K-pop hit of the summer or whatever it is that's going on.
Because they've lived with the North Korean threat for decades.
Final stop on his Asia trip before he heads home earlier this week. Tensions, though, remain high in the region as North Korea and its dictator Kim Jong-un, well, no letting up their fiery rhetoric. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new hour of America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shaw.
And I'm Arthel Neville. The president meeting with leaders at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, including Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. But dominating the headlines, another war of words with North Korea. The rogue regime's foreign ministry issuing a statement calling Mr. Trump, quote, an old lunatic over his speech in South Korea last week directed at the North. Mr. Trump responding on Twitter. Quote, why would Kim Jong-un insult me by calling me old when I would never call him short and fat? Oh, well, I try so hard to be his friend.
Situation continues to be a problem. I think that China, as you know, we saw China yesterday and the day before. President Xi, I think, is going to be a tremendous help. I hope Russia, likewise, will be a tremendous help. I think they can make a big difference. South Korea and Japan are very much unified in the sense that they want to be able to take care of a problem that's right next to them, really their neighbors. And I appreciate all of the good work you're doing with regard to the